1972, the Big Shanty Museum opens to the public. You see this is actually opening day. You see they don't even have a sign up yet that it's the Big Shanty Museum. I thought that was kind of cool. And in general, I've come back to Kennesaw 110 years after the raid. So this is what it looked like in the old museum, the Fry Cottage. Here is Lester Maddox, the governor with the railroad captain. And he's with Joseph W. Parrott, the grandson of Jacob Parrott, who was one of Andrew's raiders. Notice still has the number 3 as the number. In March of 2003, a new museum, a 40,000 square foot museum called the Southern Museum of Civil War and Locomotive History, opened. I was still on the board of the Kennesaw Museum Foundation. And sometimes people think, well, that wasn't the general move to be put in the museum. Well, if you see this little part right here, that's the old museum. That's the old Fry Cottage. And the Fry family gave the land and the building to the city. It was with the caveat that the general had to stay in that building. And so the plans for the new museum were brought up. They designed it around the old cottage. So other than moving the general a couple of feet out from the wall, the general is still in the same place it was in February of 1972. So the 40,000 square foot museum houses the general as well as several other collections. There's the ribbon cutting ceremony. And there's one other thing I was going to mention before I open up to questions, is the Lacey Hotel is, remember, where the general was captured by the raiders. And it was burned down by Sherman in, I think it's November 14th, the day before the March to the Sea started. Sherman ordered it burned to the ground along with all the railroad infrastructure from Alatoona down to Chattanooga. And it was never rebuilt. So after 100 years, memories are thin as to where was it? Where was it actually located? So in 1997, 1998, Dr. Betty Smith from Kennesaw State University had one of her archaeology classes and conducted an archaeological dig to try to find the foundations. They dug and dug and dug and found some interesting stuff. Didn't find the foundations. On the last day of the dig, they brought in ground penetrating radar, and they actually could make out not only the foundation of the Lacey, but the wells, the 2 wells that served it. And it's, of course, right under the asphalt parking lot of the depot, but at least we know where it is now. They found some interesting stuff during the dig, but most of it was Sherman occupied Big Shanty for 3 weeks before the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. So most of the stuff they found from the Civil War had to do with Sherman, not so much with the Lacey. So, any questions or comments? Anything that surprised you? You went, oh, that explains everything. I've spent my whole life wanting to know the answer to that question, and he answered it. Any stuff like that? What regular questions are okay too?
One question. I saw in 1886 that the general was standardized to the standard gauge, which brings up another question. Do you know much about the history about how the different gauges create terms?
You mean coming into
Atlanta? Well, let me tell you what I've read.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to see if my memory was correct on this. But, like you say, that they had different gauges with different tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta was at a real good, the best place for the east and west railroads to go through because it was down from the Piedmont Plateau.
Mm-hmm.
But you had these east-west hitting each other with different gauge tracks. They didn't always want to make the trains come at the same time to unload from one boxcar to another. So they had warehouses set up where those points came together. That's what they call the terminals, because they'd unload the cars and put them in the warehouse and wait for the other ones to get there because it was a different gauge track.
Right.
I just wanted to confirm that that was correct.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a whole industry built up around shifting cargo from one railroad to another. So when they standardize all the tracks throughout the whole country, they wipe that industry out, essentially. Any other questions or comments? So,
For instance, Texas locomotive and the other one that they used to chase, where were those locomotives in some other city depot sitting there?
okay. So the Yona was probably fairly old, even at the time of the raid. So as far as we know, it was scrapped. It certainly doesn't exist today. William R. Smith doesn't exist today either. Texas has been at the Cyclorama in Atlanta, in Grant Park, for a number of years. Still there. And for 25 years, every 3 years or so, I hear that, oh yeah, the city of Atlanta's going to give it to Kennesaw. So it's going to be put with the general. And I've heard that about every 3 years for about 25 years. So I heard recently about 6 months ago. So I will point out it's not in Kennesaw.
At the time of the raid, where were these locomotives that they were able to use them to chase them?
That I can tell you. Yona was a yard switcher for the Etowah Iron Works, or Mark Anthony Cooper's Iron Works at the Etowah River. So all it did was steam back and forth between the Iron Works and the WA main line. So when the Fuller and Murphy were on their pole car, when they got to the Etowah River, there's the Yona standing on the siding and it steamed up. And so they ran over. Since Murphy was in charge of all locomotives in the WNA, he could say, I'm taking this locomotive, I'm in charge, and that was the first one they used. The second one was the William R. Smith. That was at the north end of the Kingston yard. You hardly know it today, but back then there was a huge railroad yard in Kingston, and the Rome Railroad came in and hooked up with the WNA. And so when Andrews got to the southern part of the Kingston yard, it took him 65 minutes to make his way through the yard and get to go north. Well, when Fuller and Murphy steamed into Yona, they had the same problem. So they abandoned Yona, they ran to the far end of the yard and took the William R. Smith and started heading north. So as they're heading north toward Daresville, a few miles south of Daresville, this is a single track railroad, they hear the whistle from the north, which means the train is heading directly at them. They're getting closer and closer. So once again, Fuller has to run ahead with the signal flag. They stop the Texas, which is a mainline locomotive at that point. And Texas is going southbound. And then they seize the Texas, and that's where most of what the pictures or drawings of the raid you've seen, it's the Texas going backwards and the general going forward. So the William R. Smith might have been a mainline engine at that time. We don't know anything about it. But the Texas definitely was still a mainline locomotive. But that was the only